Here's a quick overview of what we'll be covering today. First, we'll talk about what the term hidden job market refers to, why it even exists, and why it's worth making attempts to tap into the hidden job market. Next, we'll discuss some of the different networking options that are available to you because networking is the best way to try to tap into that hidden job market, and we'll weigh some of the pros and cons of those options. Then we'll specifically talk about using LinkedIn to improve your networking efforts, as this can be one of the best tools for expanding your network and potentially tapping into that hidden job market. And then lastly, we'll discuss the topic of informational interviews, what they are, why you should pursue them, and how you can conduct them effectively. And then we'll close out our webinar today with our live audience Q&A so that you can have a chance to ask your own questions live with one of our career experts. All right, so let's begin by discussing what the hidden job market is, why it exists, and why it's worth your time to try to tap into this hidden market. Most people have heard the term hidden job market before, but the term itself doesn't really tell you much about what it means or how to access it. Basically, the hidden job market refers to any jobs that are not posted or advertised through more traditional means and are instead obtained through networking with other professionals that you know or that you've aimed to build relationships with so that you can be referred for different positions. And, honestly, it can be frustrating, especially if you're maybe early on in your career or you don't have a very robust network to think that jobs are filled this way. But it's also a truth that you can acknowledge and then work to leverage to your advantage. A substantial portion of people obtain jobs through networking and obtaining referrals, and you can as well if you're willing to put in some time and effort. And the main reasons that the hidden job market even exists in the first place is, first and foremost, it can save companies time and money. If they can avoid having to pay to advertise open roles or hire recruiters to fill positions by instead seeking referrals from existing employees or people in their own networks, that can save them time and minimize costs. Also, employers tend to prefer referrals. If we think about it from their perspective, when you're hiring someone through a referral, it's almost like you're receiving a traditional reference for a job applicant, but that reference is coming from someone you already know, already respect, and already trust. So understandably, this gives employers more confidence that the person they hire can genuinely be successful in this role and on their teams. Another reason is that many of these positions might not even exist yet. Essentially, what that means is, employers might be well aware of certain pain points that they're experiencing or needs that they have that aren't being fulfilled, but they haven't come to the realization yet that a new hire could help solve those issues. But someone else in the organization may know someone who has expertise in those areas and might refer their connection to help the organization, which then leads to them creating the job specifically for that person. And along those same lines, the hidden job market can also help employers address specific needs or really sort of niche needs. They might need someone who already has established relationships with a particular group of key stakeholders, or maybe knows how to use a specific tool or follow a specific process or something else that aligns with their needs. And all of these are reasons why the hidden job market exists, but they're also reasons why we encourage job seekers to take a multifaceted approach to their job search. Finding and applying jobs online is important and absolutely can lead to success, but so can networking and attempting to tap into this hidden market. The best way to tap into the hidden job market is through networking, but you don't want to just dive in before you know what you're doing. You need to be intentional about how you network and who you network with, in order to give yourself the best chances of success and to use your time most effectively. And a really good way to start is by kind of identifying your goals, essentially. You're identifying target companies and target roles. Essentially, companies you value for one reason or another and would love to work with, as well as roles that would align closely with your interests, skills, and experience. Once you have some specific companies of interest, you can then scour LinkedIn to try to identify potential connections within those companies or people who are doing the type of work that you'd like to be doing, regardless of company. And we'll talk about LinkedIn and how to find solid connections on LinkedIn later, but these are the type of people that can help you tap into the hidden job market because of where they work and who they might know that could potentially be interested in hiring you at some point down the road. And unless you already have a robust personal and professional network, LinkedIn will be your primary tool to expand your network and tap into the hidden job market. So you want to make sure your profile on LinkedIn is fully optimized. This means that you have your profile completely filled out, that you have a professional headshot. And by professional headshot, I mean one in which you look professional. You don't have to pay someone to take a headshot for you. A smartphone camera will do just fine. You also want to make sure that, all your past experience is listed and described in a way that aligns with your expertise and your career goals. You should also include industry specific skills and keywords throughout your profile. And it's also a good idea to solicit endorsements of your skills and even recommendations from those with whom you have worked in the past to help kind of bolster your credibility and your brand. And your brand, by that I mean, your reputation and how others perceive you. So to help establish and bolster your brand, it's also important to expand the number of connections you have with people within your industry or in adjacent industries, regardless of their specific role. That will also help you build some of that credibility. And then as you are, expanding your number of connections, you want to make sure that you are also actively engaging with those people so that you can build strong relationships and maintain strong relationships. Really building and maintaining strong relationships is kind of the heart of networking. So do keep that in mind. And we'll talk more about this specifically through LinkedIn later on in this presentation, but really active engagement is the best way to go about building and strengthening relationships with both existing and future connections. So do make sure to keep that in mind. Also, you want to make sure that you have your resume and any other potential job search materials like your portfolio or maybe a list of key accomplishments updated to accurately reflect your career goals before you really dive into networking. That way, you're quickly ready to share those materials with others that you're networking with when the opportunity arises. So, while you always want to tailor your resume to align with the responsibilities of a specific job posting, you often won't have a job posting to reference when you're attempting to, network within the hidden job market. So because of that, it's a good idea to maybe have a few versions of your resume that are focused on specific industries or types of roles that you're considering, so that when a networking connection asks you for your resume, you'll have a few versions ready to go and you can pick the one that matches the kind of role or company or industry that's going to be most relevant to that specific connection. All right, so we've touched on LinkedIn a little bit and we'll do a deeper dive about it shortly. But right now, let's focus on a little bit more on the diverse array of strategies or options that you can employ to effectively expand and strengthen your network. So in terms of what approaches or options you end up choosing, it really comes down to, your personal preferences and your level of comfortability. For me personally, I tend to be more introverted, which means that I'm more comfortable leveraging remote networking strategies and conducting my networking, on a smaller scale, reaching out to just a handful of kind of carefully picked potential connections at a time. Others may prefer in-person networking, like at networking events or career fairs, which also tend to be larger in scale, meaning that you can meet a lot of potential new connections in a short amount of time. Or you could even prefer, remote networking, but a large scale approach, which means you might be attempting to network with dozens or even hundreds of potential connections all within a short period of time. As I said, how you approach networking is really up to your own personal preferences and level of comfortability. And in terms of cold calling, or maybe I should call it cold messaging, reaching out to people you've never met before versus being introduced by a mutual connection, most of us would prefer to be introduced, but that's not always easy or possible. So whether you cold call or solicit introductions or a mixture of both, it's important to also be intentional about how you reach out to people. It's a good idea to try to establish some type of common bond with people when you reach out, or at the very least, show that you are eager to engage with them because, you respect and value their expertise and their career accomplishments, not just because you hope to obtain favors from them. Remember, networking should be about relationship building first and foremost, not just trying to gain favors from others. And while the strategies you choose do depend on what's comfortable for you, also try to be willing to step outside of your comfort zone at least a little bit so you aren't missing out on potentially advantageous opportunities. If you're pretty new to networking like this, maybe start small by just reconnecting with some people that you already know but haven't spoken to for a while, and then you could step into trying to forge relationships with new people. And as you ramp up your efforts, I encourage you to continue focusing on quality over quantity. And that's not to say you should take the small scale approach versus the large scale approach, but don't sacrifice quality for the sake of quantity. It's better to have fewer, stronger relationships than to try to have a lot of kind of surface level or superficial connections. And this is good networking advice, just generally speaking, but also if you hope to tap into the hidden job market. People aren't likely to recommend you for roles or bring jobs to your attention unless you have established strong relationships with them, which does take time, but is worth the effort. On this slide, you'll see a number of different options and approaches that you can use to help connect with others and expand your network. And you'll see too that there are a number of strategies for both in-person and remote networking. And I won't dissect every option on this slide, but chances are good that there are probably some things on this list that you've already engaged in, but maybe didn't realize were opportunities to network. The main point with sharing these options is to help spark some ideas for ways that you can meet new people, forge new connections, build strong relationships, expand your network, and potentially find ways to tap into the hidden job market through those relationships that you're building. All right, so because LinkedIn is the primary social media platform for professionals and remote networking has made it much easier to expand your network, I want to take some time to go over the essentials of networking specifically with LinkedIn. As we mentioned earlier, it's important to optimize your LinkedIn profile, and also it's important to seek to build relationships and actively engage with others. What that means is that when you're on LinkedIn, you shouldn't just be going around smashing the connect button with anyone and everyone. You want to be intentional about who you are approaching and make sure that you have optimized your profile and established your brand before reaching out. So in terms of optimizing your profile to help establish your brand, it means you're kind of developing and showcasing what boils down to your value proposition. What do you do well? What are the accomplishments you've achieved? How can you add value to future teams? Those are the types of questions that you'll want to ask yourself as you, create or update your profile, because they're going to help make sure that you are articulating your potential positive impact and the beneficial attributes that you could bring to different organizations. You could almost view it like trying to highlight sort of your main selling points. And in addition to identifying people that you are working at your target companies or doing the type of work that you would like to do, it's also a good idea to identify and follow industry thought leaders and content creators on LinkedIn. These are people who utilize what is known as creator mode on LinkedIn, meaning that the default on their profile is a follow button rather than a connect button. And these types of people post content that is, related to your industry or industries of choice, and they tend to be deeply connected and tapped into your industry. So they can be great people to try to connect with to tap into the hidden job market because they can likely connect you with other industry professionals. And I always recommend trying to follow thought leaders and content creators in your industry before trying to connect with them, since you likely don't know them personally yet, and connecting is kind of a deeper level than simply following. But either way, make sure that you are also actively paying attention to the things that they're posting, engaging in the comments section of their posts, sharing their posts with your own thoughts included so that you can demonstrate your genuine interest in what they have to say and add some value to the conversation. Doing things like that makes it much easier when you do eventually attempt to connect with them, because then you can reference your appreciation for their content and mention that you've been following their posts for a while, which creators tend to appreciate. So it's a good way to kind of build that bridge with them a little bit. You can also begin to eventually, once you're comfortable, start creating and posting your own organic content on LinkedIn by, sharing valuable information and helpful insights that are related to your industry and your career path. This can add impact to your value proposition that we mentioned earlier, because you'll begin to establish yourself as an actively engaged member of this professional community, which, future potential connections and future potential employers will value in you. And this type of activity will also, help further build that credibility and make it easier to connect with people that you've identified as being in, your target roles or working for target companies. And as you continue engaging with others and trying to expand your network, it's also important to be intentional and strategic with your outreach messages, either when trying to connect with someone or asking them to maybe conduct like an informational interview, which we'll discuss more later. Unless you already really know someone well, you don't just want to hit that connect button without also clicking the add a note button so that you can introduce yourself and explain why you're reaching out and trying to connect with them. You also, in that introductory message, don't want to say something like along the lines of, I'm trying to do X and was hoping you could help me. You're still just meeting this person, essentially. You don't want to be asking for specific help or try to make it seem as though you're attempting to obtain favors, because that will be really transparent and people aren't likely to help you if they think you're solely in it for yourself. Excuse me. So, that being said, you want to be genuine in your connection requests and any other type of outreach message that you might send. Explain what it is you appreciate about the other person, maybe how you've benefited from their posts or perhaps from reviewing their career trajectory. And that's the reason, why you're trying to reach out to them, because you value, their expertise and you're hoping to learn from them. And, eventually you might get to a point where you make some type of request from them, like asking for an informational interview, but at least initially you want to focus primarily on just cultivating and starting to strengthen that professional relationship with others in your field. And that means, always making sure that you are being polite, considerate, and respectful. Manners go a long way. Okay, so as we touched on already, you want to make sure you have some target companies in mind, and then also make sure, just like following thought leaders and content creators, that you are following them on LinkedIn. You can do that by just typing in the company name at the search bar at the top of LinkedIn, and then once you're on the company profile, click that follow button. There are quite a few reasons that it's worth following a company on LinkedIn. And the first one has to do with conducting your research to learn as much as you can about the company. Most companies will provide a general description about their organization, including, their product or service offerings on their LinkedIn profile. Sometimes they'll also, or actually more often than not, they will include a link to their main company website, and sometimes they'll have their hiring page linked as well. So that can make their company profile on LinkedIn a good place to start your research into their organization. Another reason to follow companies on LinkedIn is because it'll allow you to more easily monitor their posts. If you're following them, their posts should show up on your home feed, and their posts should include or can include relevant or insightful information about the industry that they operate in, new products or services that they're offering, new initiatives, maybe specific milestones or accomplishments they've achieved. All of those types of things can make for good conversation topics when you're networking with people who work there. And just like with industry thought leaders, it's also a good idea to engage with a company's posts on LinkedIn to demonstrate your interest in them as an organization and show that you are actively plugged into the topics they talk about. And that can also help set you apart from the crowd when it comes time to maybe apply for a role or network with their employees. And it also gives you things to perhaps discuss in an interview. Additionally, some companies on LinkedIn will also activate a feature on their profile that allows you to click a button to indicate that you're interested in working there. That then gives their recruiters and hiring managers a pool of candidates to look at anytime they have a position to fill. And that can be a helpful strategy. Just make sure that before you do that, you have your profile, fully filled out and optimized like we talked about. And lastly, following a company on LinkedIn can open you up to identifying and engaging and connecting with people who already work there, which I will show you how to do on our next slide. So to identify potential people to engage and connect with from your target companies, go to the company's profile page and then select the People tab on the company page. From that People tab, you'll be able to see all the employees of that company that are active on LinkedIn. It's not going to be 100% of their employees, but it will be a substantial portion of them, those that are using LinkedIn. On this page, the people tab, you'll have the opportunity to then search by different criteria. There are some preset filters that you can use, but you can also narrow things down by using the search bar to look for certain keywords like different job titles. With the preset filters that you can use, you could search for helpful things like where they studied, what they do, what they are skilled at, and my personal favorite, the one I find to be of most value, is how you are connected. That's another preset filter that I find to be particularly valuable, because as we mentioned earlier, people tend to be more open and accepting of others when they come referred to them by someone they trust. So I always like to look to see if I have any first or second degree connections when I am researching the employees of a company. That way I can see if I already know someone who works there directly, or maybe there's someone who works there that I have a shared connection with that I could potentially ask for an introduction. That can help you kind of get your foot in the door and open you up to new conversations and new connections. And you can also, interestingly enough, use this same strategy with the profile page of any college or university that you may have attended. Instead of a People tab on a college or university's page, you'll see an Alumni tab. So it'll show you all the active alumni on LinkedIn, and that can be another really good source to identify potential connections. So I wanted to throw that in there as well. When you do find someone that you would potentially like to connect with, I always try to first see if they have creator mode activated so that I can follow them for a bit and engage with their content before attempting to actually connect with them, like we talked about earlier. But if they don't, you can check out their profile and click connect. Just make sure to add that note of introduction. And either way, when it does come time to connect with someone, make sure that you are reaching out with focus by making your message, clear and concise, showing your their intention by explaining your interest in their organization or the type of role that they do, and how you would value having them as a connection so you could learn from their expertise. All right. So as I alluded to quite a few times, we're now going to take a deeper dive into informational interviews. We'll talk about, what they are and how they can be beneficial in your attempts to tap into the hidden job market. So informational interviews, if you are unfamiliar, are essentially a way for you to ask questions of someone to gather helpful insights, perspectives, and knowledge about specific roles, industries, or companies. But they also have the added benefit of letting you expand your network, strengthen relationships, and possibly open the door to new opportunities. So just like with networking in general, you should try to identify individuals who are working in the types of roles that you want to be working in or work at your target companies to request an informational interview. That way, the information that you're gaining will be more likely to be practical, helpful, and tangible for you. So when it comes time to reach out to someone to request an informational interview, there are a few things that you want to keep in mind. First and foremost, like we talked about earlier, networking is about relationship building. So if you're reaching out to someone that you already know but maybe haven't spoken to in a while, start by trying to reconnect before asking for an informational interview. That way you're showing that you prioritize the relationship over the request that you're about to make. Excuse me. If you're reaching out to someone that isn't already in your network or you haven't personally spoken to before, keep in mind that you want to try to establish some type of connection with them first, like by engaging with their posts before you reach out. But both of these approaches, whether it's someone you know or someone you haven't met yet, taking the time to really kind of emphasize that relationship, establish a connection or reestablish a connection, it's going to improve your chances of your request being well received. And regardless of which approach you're taking, you want to reach out with a message that, is clear, concise, and friendly. Show that you value their time, admire what they've accomplished in their career, and would love to learn from them. It's also a good idea to specify your request by saying that, you have a few questions you would love to ask them and see if they have availability for a quick call, roughly 10 to 15 minutes. But another good approach is to also say something along the lines of, if you're overly busy at present, would it be all right if I emailed you some questions so that you could answer when you have a chance? That's a good option to give people in case they don't have a lot of availability, because then they can respond whenever they have a moment. And hopefully as you try, reaching out to different people, you'll start to find a few that are willing to speak with you. Make sure that you then have your questions prepared ahead of time, roughly 3 to 5 questions, since you want to be respectful of their time, and that, you're actively listening to the advice that they give you and showing you that you appreciate their insights. You also should be prepared to discuss a little bit about your own goals or your reasoning for requesting the informational interview with them. You don't want to make the conversation all about you or really overload them or, ask them directly to help you get a job. But it is a good idea to kind of subtly make your own goals be known so that they can hopefully keep you in mind in the future. And all of what we're discussing with, tapping into the hidden job market, with networking, with all of this, it is a process. It takes time and you don't want to rush it. You don't want to come across too strong at the start, because that could turn people away from ever wanting to help you in the future. So trust the process and try to exercise some patience. Once you have concluded your informational interview with someone, you should always send them a thank you note afterwards. That shows or reinforces that you value their time and their assistance that they provided you. And it also goes a long way in terms of maintaining a positive relationship with them. And then remember to follow up with them, a couple weeks down the road to continue maintaining that relationship. You could do this in a couple of different ways. For example, if they maybe told you about a course that was worth taking, or suggested a thought leader in the industry that you should follow, you could then reach out to them after a week or two and share what you gained from following their advice and thank them again for the tip. This is a good way to show that you are actually listening to and acting upon the suggestions they gave you, which most people appreciate because it means they weren't wasting their time talking to you. And it also gives you a chance to kind of reopen the door to ongoing conversations, which gives you increased opportunity to ask more questions, share more information about yourself and your goals, and potentially open you up to new opportunities and new connections. Here's a good sample message that you could use to reach out to and reconnect with someone who is already, an existing connection of yours, but maybe you haven't spoken to in a while. And I'll pause for a minute here so that everyone has a chance to read this message. So there are a couple main things that you'll notice about this sample message. First, they took the time to throw in something personal and casual to try to reestablish a connection with this person, mentioning something they saw on social media. Then they gave an explanation for why they're reaching out. They're thinking about moving into the insurance industry while also acknowledging and valuing the wealth of experience and expertise that this person has in that industry. Then they laid out their ask, a chance to ask them a few questions, maybe over coffee, sometime over the next few weeks, while also giving them the option to discuss it over email if that works better for them. And then they also state that they wouldn't take up more than a half hour of this person's time. And finally, worth noting is that they kept their message clear, friendly, and respectful throughout the entire email, which is always important because, like we said before, manners matter. Here is another sample outreach message that you could use, but this sample shows how you might try reaching out to someone you've never interacted with, at least not directly before. And again, I'll pause a moment so that everyone can read this message. So again, here we see some important aspects in this message. They mentioned that they've been following this person on LinkedIn, show that they genuinely appreciate and value the information that they share on that platform. They try to establish a connection between what that person is currently doing and their own career goals. They then lay out their ask for an informational interview, offer a variety of methods to conduct the conversation, and they're being respectful of that person's time and communication preferences. And do remember, not all your outreach will yield favorable results, but using these kinds of best practices to guide your efforts can help maximize your chances of success. Allow you to build strong relationships and learn from others, and eventually help you improve your ability to tap into that hidden job market. So lastly, here are a few questions that you could consider asking in an informational interview. Each of these questions helps you get the person's inside perspective and allows you to learn things about their role or their organization that you likely would not have been able to find out through traditional research methods. And remember to also look for opportunities to organically include some of your own career interests and goals during your conversation. Then always thank them for their time and follow up with them a few weeks after your interview. Okay, so as we wrap up the presentation portion of today's webinar, let's finish with a few reminders and action steps that you can take going forward to help you tap into the hidden job market. So first one there, identify and research your target companies and roles so that you can employ a more focused approach and save yourself some time by establishing some clear goals. Next, establish your brand, Optimize your profiles and engage with others. Focus on relationship building because your reputation and the way that you interact with others will speak volumes about you. Remember to focus on that relationship building aspect because people will easily see through your efforts to simply gain favors. Next, expand your network and request informational interviews so that you have the opportunity to engage with and learn from a wider variety of people who, once you have established good relationships with them, might start suggesting opportunities to you or keep you in mind when opportunities pop up. And then lastly, have patience and trust the process. These things take time, as we mentioned, so just remind yourself to be patient and consistent in your efforts. It's often not easy to tap into the hidden job market, but if you follow these strategies that we discussed, over time, you're going to begin to see those positive results. Okay, so we're going to go ahead and move into our Q&A portion of the webinar now. As a reminder, a copy of the recording and any resources discussed within the presentation will be emailed to you within the next week. Do be sure to check your spam folder just in case it gets filtered there. For even more tips, tricks, and resources, I recommend going to the FlexJobs blog. You'll see the URL there on the screen. It includes a vast amount of free articles, resources, webinars, and videos for members and non-members alike. So with that being said, let's go ahead and open up to your questions. All right, everyone, we're going to move into the Q&A portion of our webinar now. Before we dive into your questions, could someone let me know in the chat section if you're able to hear me clearly? All right, wonderful. Thank you for that. So, my name is Keith Spencer, and I'm one of our career experts here at FlexJobs, and I'll be answering your questions. Just as a quick reminder, make sure that you're putting those questions in that Q&A tab rather than the chat tab. And if you see a question that you want to hear the answer to that someone else has asked, click that thumbs up button. So, with that being said, let's dive into our first question here, and it is a very good question. So this person is asking, how can I add value while networking? That is a really good question. So, if we're thinking about this in terms of, what is the value that you could potentially provide to others, that's going to, be sort of dependent on a case by case basis. So let's look at a few examples. If you are, an expert in some area of your field, as you're networking with others, you might find that people have questions of you, just like you have questions you want to ask. So providing answers to their questions by giving them advice and guidance, that's a way to add value. If you follow any of the advice from the presentation about trying to, follow and connect with and engage with creators, just by engaging with their posts, that is adding value to them. Because if you engage with their posts and like their posts and share their posts, that opens it up to a wider audience. Creators tend to want to grow their audience, so you're helping add some value there. If you just simply, have a good interaction with someone, maybe they answer some questions for you, and you just say to them like, "Hey, if I could ever be of assistance to you, please let me know." That is adding value, just showing that you are willing to help and support others. And then also too, if you're actively using social media, like was talked about in the presentation, and you are, you start to create your own organic posts and you start to, share the posts of others with your own thoughts and ideas added, that is information sharing. That is adding value to others. So, it's adding value in kind of subtle ways. You might not be in a position where you can recommend someone for a job or put in a referral for someone, but just by, sharing information, by engaging to help expand exposure, by, offering to help people if you ever have the opportunity to, that can add value. So it doesn't have to be extreme, it doesn't have to be significant, but you want to show that you are someone who is, authentic and genuine and isn't just in it for themselves, is trying to build these relationships. Yes, if they need it in the future, it's great to have these relationships built, but you're putting that sort of people first mentality at the forefront of your networking strategies rather than putting the me first mentality at the forefront. So hopefully that was helpful for you. Very good question though, and I appreciate you asking that. Okay, so next question here is another good one as well. Kind of relates to salary negotiation. So this person is asking, how would you recommend tactfully responding to a low offer that you received, through the hidden job market? This person is saying, they know their worth, and they're also, saving the company money because this is happening through the hidden job market there. So, how would you approach this situation? So in this scenario, the part that you mentioned that is most critical is that you know your worth. So now you need to back up your worth based on some tangible data. You want to do some research. You want to look into, average salary ranges for people in your role. Including average salary for people in your type of role with your type of experience. That's a big part of salary negotiation because you want to be speaking from a place of you want to be informed, I guess is what I'm trying to say, when you're negotiating a salary. You don't just want to throw out an arbitrary number or an arbitrary range. You want to be basing that range or that number on some data to actually support your decision there. So do your research. You're saying you know your worth. That's great. That's what you want to do. Now just back it up with some data. And then also, if they are, offering you a job through the hidden job market, a lot of times that's a situation where, you're already employed. You might be sort of job seeking because you're not necessarily satisfied with your job, or maybe just kind of passively looking, or just sort of open to different offers. So you could also leverage, your current role. If you are, that's a big assumption for me to make, but if you are still employed, you could leverage your current role in some of that negotiation as well. Saying like, well, I'm currently making somewhere in the range of this. For me to leave and start this new role, I'd be much more comfortable accepting an offer that was closer to this. And based on my market research, I understand that this is kind of the range that is to be expected for people in this type of role. So knowing your worth and backing it up with that data is important. But with that all being said, you're highlighting a really good point here, that just because you receive a job offer through the hidden job market, and that's great, it doesn't necessarily guarantee that it's going to be the right role for you, because you do need to put yourself and your needs and that of your family and things like that before any other decision here. So if that job offer is too low and you try to negotiate them higher and they're not willing to budge, or maybe only willing to budge just a little bit, you might have to potentially turn that job down. But you need to base that on your research, on your own sort of financial planning there, to really decide what's going to be best for you. But very good question. I hope that was helpful for you. But just try to approach salary negotiation with an open mind. Ask them if they are willing to negotiate, that kind of thing, and try not to speak in sort of absolutes. And I do recommend going to that blog that we have at FlexJobs, that flexjobs.com/blog, excuse me, and in the search bar, typing in salary negotiation or even just negotiation, and you'll see some additional really good resources there to help you out with that. But good question. I appreciate you asking that. Okay, so another good question here. This person's saying they're just getting started on their job search. How much does the time of year affect a company's hiring decision? So that's a really good question, but it's also one that's a little bit tricky because it's going to vary from company to company, going to vary from year to year. You see some people talking about, September just passed, but often there's sort of that September surge, but it doesn't necessarily happen every year. But you do see some peaks and valleys in hiring, around, depending on what country you're in. If you're, have a major national holiday coming up, you might see a little bit of a dip there. Like in the US, for example, during the summer season when a lot of people are going on vacations, you do see a little bit of a dip in job postings, and people sort of let up on their job search a little bit. But I try to tell people not to focus on the time of year. Like, just try to put that out of your mind and maintain a structured and consistent job search no matter what type of year it is. Because even with that example that I used, with the summer holiday, companies are still hiring. Yeah, it might slow down a little bit, but companies are still hiring. So if you're, thinking like, okay, this is when a lull is coming up, so I'm going to take a break from job searching, you could miss some good opportunities there. So I really recommend, having some structure, maintaining some consistency with your job search, and really, staying focused on it throughout the year, regardless of what time of year it is, so that you are, able to capitalize on those opportunities. And also, too, you could make an argument for, traditional dips in hiring and job searching throughout the year. Looking during those times could be highly advantageous for you, because maybe the competition will dip as well, even though there might be, a few less postings than you might normally see at other times of the year. Some of your competition in the job market right now might be taking those weeks off. So if you're not, it could help you, beat out that competition. So, it really kind of varies. Hard to say, like, yes, you're going to see a dip with, some of the winter holidays coming up. That's not necessarily true. It might happen, it might not, but try to be, structured and consistent with your job search. But very good question there. Sorry, I couldn't give you a direct sort of straight answer about yes, it's going to dip in December, or no, it's not, because it really can depend, on the year, on the company, lots of different variables. But thank you for asking that. Same kind of question here. And actually, this question kind of highlights one of those variables that we're talking about. So, this person is in healthcare management. The job market is kind of down in that field right now for, all jobs across that market, even for, especially for remote jobs, because a lot of employers are implementing sort of a hybrid model. What's the likelihood of getting hired in October or November, knowing that most company budgets are exhausted? So, yeah, the likelihood could be low, but if, something changes in the market and all of a sudden, there is need for, healthcare management folks, it could change really rapidly, is what I'm trying to say. But also, the variable that I was talking about that you're highlighting is, different companies have different fiscal years. So, as they might be exhausting their budgets towards the end of the fiscal year, they're also looking at their budget for the beginning of the new fiscal year. So, you want to start planning. You want to still be looking for open jobs. You want to still be doing your networking, trying to tap into the hidden job market as these companies are thinking about the hiring that they might be about to do as their new fiscal year starts. So, it's hard to say what your likelihood is. Your likelihood, of course, is going to increase the more that you are focused on using the right strategies. So, yes, you want to be networking and trying to tap into that hidden job market, but you also want to be using, job search boards, finding jobs that are a good fit for, your interests, your preferences, your experience. You want to be really tailoring your application materials, meaning your resume and cover letter, for each individual role. You want to try to be following up with recruiters or hiring managers after you apply. There's a lot of things that are involved in a good job search strategy. So you want to use that multifaceted approach, like was mentioned during that presentation. But sorry to go off on a little bit of a tangent there. Again, I know I can't answer that question just really straight with, straight and objectively, I guess I should say. But, hopefully necessarily allowing your effort to dip at the end of this fiscal year as well. But very good question, and thank you for asking that. Okay, let's try to squeeze in a couple more questions here. Okay, so another good one, more of a statement than a question, but we'll address it regardless. Oops. Could someone tell me in the chat? Are you all able to hear me now? Okay. It looks like you can hear me now. Okay, good. Sorry about that. Yeah, I got a alert from the software that my microphone had disconnected, so I had to refresh my browser there, but it looks like it's working now. My apologies about that. I will backtrack just a little bit. Not sure where we kind of cut out, but just to reiterate, try to maintain that consistent job search. Pay attention to those market trends. If the fiscal year is coming to an end in your industry, still be trying to develop those strong connections, still be trying to do, all the right things like looking for job postings on online job boards, tailoring your application materials for each job, trying to follow up with recruiters and hiring managers, keep doing all the right strategies using that multifaceted approach, and then have yourself prepared for when that new fiscal year starts, because you could potentially see an uptick. But different industries operate on different fiscal years, so just make sure that you're paying attention to your own market. It doesn't necessarily start on January 1. Other companies and other industries operate on a different fiscal calendar. So hopefully that was helpful for you. Sorry that I did cut out there, but good question. And I appreciate the person who asked that. Our next question, we're going to try to fit a couple more in. So this is a bit more of a statement than a question, but we will do our best to kind of answer this. This person is saying that every cold message that they've ever tried, no matter how polite they are, has been ignored. People seem like they might be annoyed or maybe think that they're a scammer. And yeah, you're highlighting one of the biggest frustrations of trying to use networking as a strategy in your job search. Sometimes you can do all the right things, but you might still get ignored. And that can be really frustrating. My advice to you is continue trying to do the right things. Sometimes people just don't have the time or they don't have the interest in helping others like we might hope. But also, look at what those messages are. Look at what your strategies have been. In the presentation, we mentioned trying to kind of establish a bit of a connection with someone first. Maybe seeing if you can't follow them on LinkedIn first and engage with them on LinkedIn, through their posts first, trying to demonstrate that you have some value, like we talked about earlier, that you are bringing to the table before trying to reach out to them. Because if you're reaching out to them with your own agenda, that's going to be really clear, and a lot of people aren't going to respond to that. Like, I'll use myself as an example. Like, I use creator mode on LinkedIn, and I post 2 to 3 times a week, and I actively engage with people in the comment sections of my posts. But I get people reaching out to me that I see that they follow me and they're trying to connect with me, and they don't send a message, or they send a message that is very much focused on Keith, I need your help. And I appreciate that, and my heart goes out to people like that. But it's hard. It's not possible to respond to everyone, to answer every question, to help every person. But the people who take the time to really try to say, like, hey, this post that you published on LinkedIn, I found it really insightful. That was great. I'm going to keep following your posts. And then they actively engage in my comment section and stuff like that. Those are the people that I'm more open and willing to have a conversation with and to answer their questions, because they've taken the time to show that that the things I do are meaningful to them. They're not just sending a very transparent, like, Keith, I want your help. I'm sorry, I don't have time right now. But if we develop that relationship and we start having that continued engagement, and then you down the road ask me a question or ask for some type of assistance, if I have the time, I'm gonna use that time to try to support you. So it's all about the approach. Like, you want to make sure that you're kind of laying that groundwork before trying to send out those cold messages, because then it's not a cold message, it's more of a lukewarm message. So you want to make sure that you're demonstrating that you're not just in it for yourself. And I'm not saying that you are. The person who asked this question, it really could just be that the people you're trying to reach out to might not have the time, and you're just getting unlucky there. But also, reflect on what your messages have looked like, reflect on what your efforts have been up to this point, because changing and adapting adopting some new strategies could lead to some greater success there. Okay, so let's go ahead. Well, let's try to answer one more question here. Let's see. Okay, so when interested in a posted position on LinkedIn, is it more effective to apply on the company's career page versus applying on LinkedIn? I'm a big fan personally of always applying through the company's page because that can kind of communicate some things about you. That you took more effort, more time and effort to learn a bit more about their company. It means that you made the jump from LinkedIn or another job board to their company page. It also helps protect you a little bit more from potential scams because you can find some scams on job boards that are out there. So, going to the company's hiring page and seeing the job postings there, you can verify that it is a legitimate job because you do see it posted on the company's hiring page, and then also make sure that you're applying through their page can help keep you protected a little bit as well because you can find copycat scammers on some of the job boards that are out there that even though they see a job posting or even though a job posting might exist on a company's page doesn't necessarily mean that the one you're finding on a job board is going to be that actual posting. So I think it's safer, and I think it communicates some positive things about you to actually apply on the company's page rather than through LinkedIn or some other type of job board. So very good question there. I know we got into the topic of scams a little bit off topic, I guess I should say. That's my fault, but I do think that that's a benefit of applying through a company's page. So we are quite a bit over time here, so we're going to go ahead and close out. I really do appreciate you all taking the time to be here for this webinar. Hopefully there was some good information both in the presentation and in the Q&A for you. Sorry that my audio cut out a little bit. I added on a couple extra minutes there just to kind of make up for that. Hopefully that didn't cause any disruptions there. But again, thank you all for taking the time to be here today. Really hope that you consider joining us for some future upcoming webinars that we have. As a reminder, we always do our weekly Q&A sessions weekly 30-minute Q&A with one of our career experts on Wednesdays. So keep an eye out for those. And thank you again. I wish you all the best of luck in your job search, and take care.